So for 10,000 years, I mean, the Imperium of Man has essentially survived the Tyranid threat by relying on one foundational, undeniable truth, right?
Right, the biological imperative.
Exactly. The idea that the swarm is basically a slave to its own hunger. The Great Devourer operates on this cosmic algorithm that is so simple, it's almost, well, predictable.
It really is. I mean, it strips a world of every single microbe, ocean, atmosphere, and then it just moves on.
Yeah, it's an apex predator that literally cannot stop moving because if it stops moving, it starves to death.
Right.
And the tactical doctrines of the entire Ordo Xenos, the defense strategies of the Adeptus Astartes, even the logistical supply chains of the Astra Militarum, they are all built around combating an enemy that only knows how to consume.
It's their entire playbook. You defend against a swarm that is just constantly surging forward.
And this is what we are getting into today. What happens when the apocalypse just stops eating?
Yeah, that is the terrifying question.
Right. What happens when the ultimate nomadic predator plants its feet, refuses to consume the world it's standing on, and, starts pouring concrete?
It completely upends everything we know.
It really does. So today, for this deep dive, we are looking at a faction that completely breaks that Tyranid algorithm. We're talking about Hive Fleet Tiamat.
Hive Fleet Tiamat, yeah.
The source documents we've compiled under the umbrella of Architects of the Void, the Tiamat anomaly, they detail an enemy that has basically traded mindless consumption for patient, strategic architecture.
Which is a massive paradigm shift.
Huge. We are dissecting a shift that completely shatters the Imperium's understanding of the hive mind. So, okay, let's unpack this, because the implications here fundamentally rewrite the threat level of the Tyranid species for you, me, and the entire galaxy.
Yeah, the tactical shift, I mean, it really cannot be overstated.
Well,
When we evaluate the Tyranids normally, we're usually looking at a biological weapon functioning at maximum aggression.
right, just pure momentum.
Exactly. The Tyranid swarm is basically the universe's most efficient dismantling mechanism. So to see that mechanism halt its primary function, consumption, and pivot to construction, it requires us to completely discard the established playbook.
Because they aren't acting like animals anymore.
Right. We are no longer observing a ravenous beast operating on instinct. We are looking directly at a calculating long-term cosmic intelligence. I mean, Hive Fleet Tiamat proves the hive mind possesses a terrifying capacity for delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification, wow.
Yeah. And in a predator, delayed gratification implies a grand design that we're fundamentally failing to grasp.
Well, the timeline of this anomaly is, it's the first thing that really threw me when I was looking at the
The
sources.
chronology is wild.
It is. The source material highlights that Hive Fleet Tiamat is the most unique phenomenon among the known fleets, and a massive part of that classification comes down to their arrival date.
Right.
Because Tiamat was first encountered in the Tiamat system all the way back in M35.
M35. Yeah, we really need to contextualize that era for a second, because the sheer chronological gap there is staggering.
It's thousands of years before the main invasions.
Exactly. The Imperium in M35 was heavily embroiled in the Nova Terra interregnum. The Adeptus Terra was completely fractured, the galaxy was split, and the Imperium's attention was turned almost entirely inward.
So humanity was basically busy tearing itself apart.
Right. Behemoth, Kraken, Leviathan, the major Tyranid invasions that define the modern Tyranid wars, they would not arrive for millennia.
Thousands of years later.
Yeah. Tiamat slipped into the galactic eastern fringe during a period of massive Imperial blind spots. They arrived in this quiet pocket of space while everyone else was distracted.
So they didn't ride the bow wave of the main invasion fleets at all. They were early, unfathomably early.
Very early.
And the documents theorize that this early arrival implies Tiamat wasn't just, a lost splinter fleet or some errant scouting party that got blown off course by a warp storm.
No, it was deliberate.
Right. They were a dedicated vanguard probe, a localized genetic seed sent ahead of the main swarm.
And the terminology there, genetic seed, that is the crux of the horror here.
How so?
Well, when an intelligence plants a seed, it is establishing infrastructure for a harvest that won't occur for seasons, or in this case, millennia.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Consider the biological foresight required for the hive mind to detach a fraction of its mass, hurl it across the intergalactic void, and program it not to feed.
But to build.
To prepare the ground for fleets that won't arrive for thousands of years. It completely dismantles the Ordo Xenos narrative of the Tyranids as just a reactionary starving swarm fleeing some extragalactic threat.
Because a starving animal does not plant crops.
Exactly. A starving animal does not send surveyors to build a supply depot before the main army marches.
It's basically the biological equivalent of a von Neumann probe.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy, yes.
Like a self-replicating spacecraft sent to a neighboring star system just to build infrastructure. But here, instead of silicon and steel, it's a localized Dyson sphere made of teeth and chitin.
A horrifying thought, but yes.
And their behavior upon arriving in the Tymet system completely confirms that architectural mandate, right? Because they claimed the worlds within the system and then they refused to leave.
They just stopped.
Right. We know standard hive fleets drink the oceans, they consume the atmosphere, they leave a sterile rock.
A dead world.
But Tiamat didn't do that. They settled the system, they established a permanent biological occupation.
And the Imperium's response to this permanent occupation was, as you might expect, predictably absolute.
I mean, it's the Imperium.
Right. Upon discovering a Tyranid infestation that just refused to migrate, the local Imperial commanders completely bypassed standard quarantine protocols. They initiated a localized exterminatus.
They just went straight for the nuclear option.
Exactly. The source material notes the deployment of sustained fusion bombings against the Tymet system.
Okay, wait. We are talking about fusion warheads here. This isn't just a conventional orbital bombardment.
No, this is planet-cracking stuff.
Right. A fusion bomb detonating on a planetary surface yields temperatures rivaling a stellar core. It flashes oceans to steam instantly, it liquefies the crust, and it permanently alters the atmospheric composition.
It is the ultimate scorched earth tactic.
It is literally the burn the house down to kill the spider approach.
Yet, the source text is completely definitive on the outcome. The Tyranid life within the Tiamat system was never fully extinguished.
See, that stretches the limits of biological credibility for me. I mean, how does an ecosystem survive a localized star igniting on its surface?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah. Even if the Tyranids burrowed deep into the mantle, the seismic shock waves and the subsequent hypertoxic oxygen-depleted atmosphere, I mean, that should have starved out whatever remained.
Well, you're applying standard planetary ecology to a hyper-adaptive xenoform.
Okay, fair.
Tiamat didn't just occupy the system. They fundamentally terraformed it to withstand apocalyptic thermal and kinetic trauma.
So they anticipated the fusion bombs.
Or they adapted to them in real time. To survive fusion bombardment, the Tiamat biosphere likely developed these vast subterranean capillary networks, acting as planetary heat sinks.
Oh, wow. So they dispersed the heat.
Exactly. Dispersing the thermal bloom of a fusion detonation across the entire planetary mantle. We're looking at a biome that can metabolize radiation.
Wait, metabolize it?
Yeah, utilizing the fallout from Imperial weapons as a localized energy source. They didn't just survive the fire, they likely integrated the thermal energy into their own biological matrix.
So the Imperium basically fed them with fusion bombs?
Essentially, yes. They built a bunker out of the planet itself.
Okay, so if a nomadic predator pivots to become a static settler like that, its entire evolutionary biology has to shift, right?
Completely.
Because a standard Tyranid swarm usually relies on momentum. It survives by constantly absorbing new biomass to replace its staggering attrition rates. It's a numbers game for them.
Right, but if it stops running, if it stands its ground in a single system, it can no longer rely on momentum. It has to take the hit.
It has to dig in.
So how did Tiamat adapt its biology for a static defense?
Well, what's fascinating here is they engineered themselves into a literal biological siege engine. The source material states that Tiamat's biology is entirely evolved for attritional warfare.
Meaning a slow, grinding fight.
Exactly. Standard Tyranid tactical doctrine relies on hyper-aggressive, fast-moving assaults. Hormagaunts and gene stealers just overwhelm a defensive line before the enemy can even establish interlocking fields of fire.
Pure speed and numbers.
But Tiamat discarded speed for density. The organisms of this fleet possess a unique diamond-hard chitin composite.
Okay, let's analyze that for a second, that diamond-hard chitin composite. Because normal Tyranid chitin is already incredibly resilient, right? It's roughly analogous to plasteel or ceramite in its ablative properties. It's tough stuff.
But a composite implies the hive mind is biologically weaving, like a lattice of carbon nanotubes, or synthesizing silicate structures directly into the carapace of their frontline organisms.
Right, it's an intentional metallurgical process, but biological.
And the caloric cost to grow a single organism with diamond-grade armor, I mean, that must be astronomical.
It's a massive investment of biomass.
And the text notes this armor provides exceptional protection against energy and kinetic force.
Right.
Like last cannon fire and macro bolter rounds are essentially just bouncing off the infantry.
Yeah, and the physical manifestation of this armor dictates their entire tactical deployment. The source describes their combat formations not as the typical leaping, slashing swarms, but as dense, grinding clutches.
Grinding clutches, that sounds awful.
They form these interlocking walls of carapace. They don't charge to break the enemy line. They advance at a glacial pace, using their own bodies as a monolithic, living shield.
Okay, I have to push back on the tactical viability of a living shield, though, especially in the 41st millennium.
Okay, how so?
Well, put yourself in the command throne of an Imperial Navy admiral, right? If you encounter an enemy fleet or a planetary defense force whose entire strategy is to just sit in dense, grinding clutches and absorb kinetic and energy weapons,
Right.
that is just a math problem. It's a logistical equation.
You think you could just outshoot them?
Exactly. A static shield does not shoot back with the same ferocity as a mobile strike force. If they are just acting as an anvil, wouldn't a sustained orbital bombardment, macro cannons, lance strikes, cyclonic torpedoes, wouldn't that eventually crack the anvil?
It seems like it should.
Why is a static biological defense such a nightmare scenario for the Imperium if they can just bomb it from orbit forever?
Or your logistical equation assumes a finite biological reserve.
Okay.
The Imperium relies on supply chains traversing the warp. Every single macro cannon shell fired has to be manufactured on a forge world, loaded onto a transport, navigated through the immaterium, and finally delivered to the war zone.
Which takes months, sometimes years.
Exactly. Tiamat's supply chain is entirely internal and instantaneous. When an Imperial Lance strike vaporizes the front line of a Tiamat grinding clutch, the organisms behind them simply consume the charred biomass.
Wait, they eat the dead ones?
Yes. They synthesize the thermal energy from the blast, and they grow new ablative plating. The shield isn't static. It is rapidly, infinitely regenerating.
So you're basically shooting into a self-healing wall.
Right. Furthermore, your tactical assessment falls into the exact trap the hive mind is exploiting.
What do you mean?
You're focusing entirely on breaking the shield. But a shield of that magnitude, an entire system garrisoned by diamond-clad organisms, programmed with zero self-preservation, willing to absorb fusion fire just to hold a single grid coordinate.
Yeah.
It demands we ask a different question.
Right. Why is the shield there at all?
Exactly.
Because you don't expend the astronomical caloric energy required to build a diamond-hard vault in the middle of a desert just to protect the sand.
You really don't. The defensive posture is a desperate, single-minded protection of a specific asset.
So they are guarding something.
If the hive mind is willing to sacrifice billions of heavily armored organisms just to hold the perimeter of the Tiamat system, the asset they are guarding is worth far more to their grand design than the staggering amount of biomass being spent to defend it.
The shield implies something incredibly valuable is being shielded.
The grinding clutches and the hyperdense chitin, they're merely the outer walls of the anomaly.
Which brings us to the core mystery of this entire deep dive. To find out what the living shield is protecting, we have to look at a specific world deep within the Tiamat system, right? Ziaphoria.
Yes, Ziaphoria is the key.
The documents reveal that the true purpose of High Fleet Tiamat is anchored on this planet. What they have constructed on Ziaphoria is a continent-spanning organic structure.
Massive in scale.
And it is composed of two primary materials, that same super hard ablative keen we talked about and, quote, soft and cephalic flesh.
Now, what's fascinating here is the terminology. It's the most alarming data point in the entire source document.
Encephalic.
Right. Encephalic directly denotes cortical tissue, neural pathways, brain matter.
Brain matter.
We are not discussing a standard hive node or spawning pool. We are looking at an exposed biological brain spanning the tectonic plates of a planetary body.
See, the thermodynamics alone on that are mind-bending. I mean, the human brain consumes roughly 20% of our body's energy just to maintain baseline synaptic function.
It's an energy hog.
Right. So a neural network scaled to the size of a continent, pumping biological coolant and synaptic fluid across thousands of miles of encephalic tissue. The ambient heat generated by that structure would boil the local weather systems.
Oh, absolutely. And the physical heat is nothing compared to the psychic radiation.
Right, because it's the Tyranids.
Exactly. A structure composed entirely of Tyranid neural tissue generates a localized shadow in the warp of horrifying intensity. The source explicitly states the structure thrummed with immense psychic energy.
We really need to dissect the mechanics of the shadow in the warp here for you guys listening. Usually the shadow is a byproduct of a Tyranid fleet's presence. It's
Yeah.
like exhaust fumes.
Yeah, it's the psychic static created by billions of Tyranid organisms communicating with the hive mind simultaneously. It acts like white noise in the immaterium, smothering astropathic choirs and just causing generalized madness on worlds they approach.
But on Ziaphoria, it's not ambient static. It's a concentrated, weaponized frequency.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source provides two visceral incidents to illustrate the sheer pressure of this localized shadow, right?
Yes, and they are both chilling. The first involves an Eldari ranger party. Now, the Eldari possess a hyperconductive neural architecture. They are a profoundly psychic race, deeply attuned to the currents of the warp.
Very sensitive to psychic noise.
Extremely. The text notes that this ranger party simply approached the Ziaphoria megastructure. They did not engage it, they didn't attack.
They just got close to it.
They merely entered its proximity, and several of the rangers were sent into immediate, violent convulsions.
Man. So their nervous systems were effectively short-circuited?
Completely overloaded. If Eldari neural pathways are highly conductive wires, the Ziaphoria structure is basically a planetary-scale power surge. It blew their synaptic fuses just by being in the same localized space.
And the second incident is far more mechanically terrifying, honestly.
Oh, yeah. The Death Watch librarian.
Yes. The psychic backlash from the encephalic structure was so intense, it caused the physical cranial detonation of a Death Watch librarian.
Okay, let's break down the warp physics of that death for a second, because a Death Watch librarian suffering a physical head explosion is a massive anomaly.
It should not happen.
Right. A librarian's mind is a psychic fortress. They are equipped with Aegis hoods, which is this archaeotech designed specifically to ground and vent excess warp pressure.
It's essentially a psychic lightning rod.
Exactly. And they spend centuries conditioning their minds to withstand the absolute horrors of the immaterium without suffering physical degradation.
Right. So for an Aegis hood to fail so catastrophically implies the psychic pressure on Ziaphoria is not just ambient static. It is a directed hydraulic press of telepathic force.
A hydraulic press. That's a great way to put it.
The Tyranid signal forcefully bypassed the librarian's psychic conditioning, overloaded the Aegis hood's venting mechanisms, and created a localized feedback loop of warp energy within his skull.
The pressure just had nowhere to go.
The pressure differential between the immaterium and the materium equalized violently, resulting in fatal cranial detonation. That is targeted, overwhelming psychic warfare emanating from a stationary biological construct.
But see, this introduces a massive logistical paradox.
Okay, what's the paradox?
Well, we established earlier that Tiamat is a static siege fleet, right? They are garrison in the Tiamat system. They are not roaming the segmentum-stripping worlds of their biosphere.
Correct. They are staying put.
But they are powering a continent-sized brain that requires a continuous astronomical influx of calories to maintain its encephalic mass and to project a psychic signal strong enough to literally blow up a Space Marine librarian's head.
It needs fuel. A lot of fuel.
Right. So if the predator refuses to leave its cave to hunt, how does it keep the brain from starving to death?
Well, what's fascinating here is the Tyranids solved this logistical paradox by engineering a supply chain that bypasses the need for a hunt entirely.
Wait, how?
If you cannot hunt the prey, you must manipulate the prey into delivering itself to the slaughter.
Oh, man.
To feed the Ziaphoria megastructure, High Fleet Tiamat spawned a highly specialized mimetic virus. They birthed a unique strain of gene stealer cult known as the Choir of the Void.
The Choir of the Void. We need to analyze how radically this cult departs from standard gene stealer infiltration doctrines.
It's a complete inversion.
Because normally, a gene stealer cult is an insurgency tool. They infect the lower strata of a hive world, they infiltrate the planetary defense forces, sabotage the orbital defense lasers, and initiate a global uprising specifically timed to coincide with the arrival of a Tyranid fleet.
Right. They weaken the immune system of the planet so the swarm can consume it with minimal resistance.
But the Choir of the Void flips that doctrine on its head entirely.
They are not preparing worlds for an external invasion at all. They are establishing a self-sustaining, automated logistics pipeline.
An automated pipeline.
The source reveals that the primary doctrine of this cult is the propagation of a myth. They preach the existence of a paradise planet located deep within the Tiamat system.
It's such an insidious exploitation of imperial sociology.
It really is.
Because if you think about it, the Imperium is a brutal, grinding theocracy. The average citizen on a hive world works 18-hour shifts in toxic atmospheric conditions, subsisting on corpse starch, with absolutely zero upward mobility.
Life is cheap and miserable.
And that systemic misery of the Imperium is the fertile soil the Choir of the Void is planting its seeds in. They aren't using violent mind control, they are weaponizing hope.
Weaponized hope, yes.
It's basically a mimetic supply chain poisoning, like a cosmic anglerfish using religion as the glowing lure in the dark. It's the ultimate false travel agency.
And it works flawlessly. By promising salvation and a life free from the Administratum's grueling tithes, the cult incites mass pilgrimages.
Millions of people.
Millions. They guide these desperate followers, compelling them to hijack or commandeer massive transport vessels and route them directly into the heart of the Tiamat system.
Just imagine the sheer scale of this migration. Millions of imperial citizens packing their entire families into the cargo holds of enslaved freighters, enduring the perilous navigation of the warp, fueled entirely by the belief that they are finally escaping the nightmare of the 41st millennium.
It's a tragic irony.
And when they finally break warp translation at the coordinates of this promised paradise, they fly their ships directly into the grinding, diamond-hard clutches of a Tyranid siege fleet.
They voluntarily deliver their own biomass to the digestion pools.
They become raw biological mortar for a continent-sized brain. It's an automated feeding tube powered entirely by religious fervor.
The efficiency is just horrifying. The Tyranids expend zero energy hunting. The prey utilizes its own resources, its own ships, and its own navigational infrastructure to deliver itself to the predator.
It's brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant.
But the strategic brilliance of the Choir of the Void extends beyond mere logistics. The source material notes a catastrophic ripple effect stemming from these pilgrimages.
Oh, the Imgarl connection.
Yes. The infamous Imgarl gene stealers are explicitly believed to have originated from contaminated pilgrim vessels that encountered the Tiamat system.
See, that is a massive revelation for the lore right there. Because the Imgarl strain is one of the most volatile and dangerous gene stealer variants in the entire galaxy.
They are notoriously difficult to eradicate.
Right. And for a long time, their origin was completely shrouded in mystery. The idea that they are essentially an accidental export, like a byproduct of this false paradise trap, it changes our entire understanding of their proliferation.
Well, think about the mechanics of a pilgrimage. It is rarely a one-way trip for the vessels involved.
All right. Someone has to bring the ship back.
Exactly. Ships arrive, offload their cargo of believers, and some inevitably return to Imperial space to spread the gospel of the choir and ferry more converts.
Like a shuttle service.
While docked in the Tiamat system, these returning vessels are exposed to the unique, hyper-adaptive Tyranid organisms of the siege fleet. The ships jump back into the warp, unknowingly carrying the Imgarl strain.
So the Tiamat system isn't just a localized trap.
No, it acts as a viral pump, passively infecting the interstellar trade routes of the segmentum.
The Choir of the Void is both a supply chain for Ziaphoria and a vector for a galactic pandemic.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's step back and synthesize the raw data of the Tiamat anomaly for a second. We have a Vanguard fleet from M35, we have invincible biological armor, a continent-sized psychic brain, and a religion designed solely to feed it.
The architecture is flawless, and the logistics are self-sustaining.
But the ultimate question remains, right, why? To what end? What is the actual function of the Ziaphoria megastructure?
The Ordo Xenos has dedicated entire conclaves to answering that exact question, and the source outlines 3 primary theories proposed by inquisitorial scholars regarding the grand design of High Fleet Tiamat.
Let's heavily scrutinize these 3 theories because, honestly, the galactic implications of each of them are apocalyptic.
They really are. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the first theory posits that the encephalic structure on Ziaphoria is a hyperdirectional psychic beacon.
Like a Tyranid Pharos device.
Exactly. Its primary function would be to pierce the deep intergalactic void and serve as a navigational homing signal for the Tyranid fleets.
Right, because if we look at the physics of extragalactic travel, navigating the void between galaxies without a fixed reference point is nearly impossible, even for a biological hive mind.
You need a lighthouse.
If Ziaphoria is a lighthouse, it implies a terrifying reality about the Tyranid forces we are currently fighting. Leviathan, Kraken, Behemoth, these fleets have brought the Imperium to its knees.
They've nearly broken the galaxy.
But if Tiamat was a Vanguard probe sent millennia ago specifically to build a lighthouse, it strongly suggests the fleets we fought so far are merely the Vanguard as well.
Just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. The main bulk of the Tyranid species is still out there in the dark, using Ziaphoria's signal to guide their approach. Tiamat is holding the door open for something much worse.
It's a sobering thought. But the second theory expands on the concept of a beacon, but alters its fundamental purpose.
Okay.
It suggests the structure could be a psychic communications hub, a Tyranid equivalent to the Astronomicon.
Oh, wow. Okay, the Imperial Astronomicon is the psychic beacon generated by the Golden Throne on Terra, right? It provides a fixed navigational point in the warp, allowing the Navis Nobilite, the navigators of the Imperium, to steer ships through the Immaterium.
It's the only thing keeping the Imperium together.
Without the Astronomicon, the Imperium fractures instantly. Interstellar trade stops, military reinforcement becomes impossible, and humanity is isolated on a million disconnected worlds.
Exactly. So if the Tyranids are constructing their own Astronomicon on Ziaphoria, it indicates a profound shift in their strategic intent.
How?
Well, you do not expend the resources to build permanent galactic-scale navigational infrastructure if your only goal is rapid consumption.
Oh, I see. You don't build roads if you're just going to eat the forest.
Exactly. An Astronomicon implies a desire for a stable, synchronized network. It implies the Tyranids are aiming for permanent occupation of our galaxy. They're not merely clearing the forest, they're laying down roads.
They are setting up the infrastructure for a Tyranid empire.
They transition from a localized natural disaster to an occupying interstellar government.
And the biological logistics of a Tyranid empire, connected by their own psychic warp roads, that would render the Imperium completely obsolete.
They would simply outcompete humanity on every level.
But the third theory, man, this is perhaps the most immediately destructive one.
Yes, the amplifier theory.
Right. It hypothesizes that the Ziaphoria structure is a massive organic device designed to amplify the shadow in the warp on a galactic scale.
Let's map out the warp mechanics of an amplified shadow, because it's bleak. A standard Geller field on an Imperial ship relies on a relatively stable baseline in the Immaterium to function.
It creates a bubble of reality around the ship.
Exactly. If the local space is flooded with the intense psychic static of a Tyranid fleet, Geller fields stutter, and astropathic communication becomes impossible.
But if Ziaphoria acts as a localized amplifier, like a pariah nexus composed entirely of Tyranid brain matter, broadcasting a weaponized shadow across the entire segmentum.
The result would be a forced permanent blackout of the Immaterium.
So what does this all mean for you and me? For the listener?
If an amplified shadow in the warp were broadcast across the galaxy, it wouldn't just cause localized madness or kill the occasional Deathwatch librarian.
Bro.
It would permanently blind the Navis Nobilite. It would sever all astropathic communication networks simultaneously.
Yeah.
Every single Imperial world would be plunged into total isolation.
No distress calls could be sent.
None. No fleets could be mustered or navigated. The Imperium would be deaf, dumb, and blind, trapped in real space, while the Tyranids systematically dismantled isolated worlds at their leisure.
It would be an enforced galaxy-wide paralysis.
Exactly.
When you look at those three theories, right? A homing beacon for the true swarm, the infrastructure for permanent colonization, or a galactic EMP that permanently blinds the Imperium, it just forces a total reevaluation of the Tyranid threat.
You can't look at them the same way anymore.
No. The Ordo Xenos has spent 10,000 years classifying the Great Devourer as a mindless, ravenous tide acting purely on instinct. Tiamat proves that doctrine is a lethal underestimation.
We are facing a force of terrifying intelligence.
Right. An intelligence playing a long game that the Imperium is only just beginning to comprehend, capable of executing a strategic plan that spans thousands of years and leverages the very socio-political flaws of the Imperium to fuel its construction.
And, there is a final, highly disturbing detail in the source material that really cements the urgency of this threat.
What's that?
The documents explicitly state that the construction on Ziaphoria is not yet complete.
Wait, really? After all this time?
Despite thousands of years of uninterrupted construction, despite the relentless influx of millions of pilgrims fed into the digestion pools by the Choir of the Void, the megastructure is still a work in progress.
Oh, man.
The text notes that Tiamat's tendrils continue to quest outward, eternally hungry for more biomass to fuel the project.
Meaning the encephalo mass is still expanding.
The continental neural network is growing deeper and wider. So whatever psychic intensity it's currently projecting, the pressure that short circuits Eldari mines and obliterates heavily shielded Space Marine librarians.
Yeah.
That is not its peak output.
Oh, wow.
It is merely the baseline of an unfinished machine. As the structure grows, the psychic radiation will scale exponentially.
So the anomaly is not just a static historical event, it is an active, escalating countdown. To pull all of this together, I mean, the story of High Fleet Tiamat forces the Imperium and us, as observers of this lore, to basically discard a very comforting narrative.
It's psychologically easier to face a hungry beast, right?
Right. A beast is predictable, you can calculate its trajectory, you can starve it of resources, or you can just apply overwhelming kinetic force to kill it.
But Pyramid takes away the comfort of a simple enemy.
We are instead facing patient, methodical architects who arrived in the galaxy millennia ago to lay the groundwork for a dark, unknown purpose. They willingly traded their nomadic mobility for impenetrable, diamond-hard armor.
They traded mindless consumption for a massive, continent-spanning psychic brain.
And they weaponized the desperate theology of the Imperium to feed their creation.
And for you listening, why does this matter? Beyond just the intricate lore of the 41st millennium, the Tiamat anomaly serves as a profound reminder, a case study really, on the nature of threat assessment.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because it is an inherent flaw in strategic thinking to focus exclusively on the loudest, most aggressive danger. The enemy charging at the gates, consuming everything in sight, well, that demands immediate attention.
Obviously.
But Tiamat teaches us that sometimes the most catastrophic threat isn't the one making noise.
Right.
Sometimes the greatest threat is the predator that stops, turns away from the immediate battle, and quietly begins pouring a foundation in the dark. They are the enemies who rely on your distraction, waiting for the exact right moment to turn on the machine they have spent millennia building.
I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought to chew on regarding the Tiamat anomaly that really builds on everything we've talked about.
Oh, this is the part that keeps me up at night.
Right. We know from the Inquisition's timeline that Tiamat arrived in M35 as a vanguard probe. They were a localized genetic seed sent early to build this massive psychic infrastructure on Ziaphoria.
Yes.
But the intergalactic void is vast. It is unfathomably wide. If the Tyranid hive mind possessed the strategic foresight to detach one probe, hurl it across the void millions of years early, and program it to build a continent-sized brain,
Right.
what makes the Ordo Xenos think Tiamat is unique?
Exactly.
What if Ziaphoria isn't the only megastructure? What if there are dozens of other unseen vanguard probes buried in unexplored, forgotten corners of the galaxy, quietly feeding their own encephalic networks?
Waiting in the dark.
What if the Tyranids aren't just building a single beacon, but an entire synchronized array, just waiting for the moment to link their networks together and flip the switch?
A horrifying thought.
Something for you to think about until our next deep dive. Remember, just because the swarm stops running doesn't mean you are safe. Sometimes it just means they've decided to move in.